Twice? Tracy exclaimed. You went back to him twice? Oh God, girl, you're going to wear the poor guy out. Don't forget, she added with a smile, that the rest of us need his attention sometimes too. Katie felt a slight blush on her cheeks. She didn't understand why. Her account of what happened was quite frank, and Tracy seemed to enjoy all the details, but was clearly not surprised by what she heard. However, when Katie said she liked it so much she came back for a second round, Tracy's eyebrows shot up. Why did Katie feel awkward? Because it's normal to be a little greedy about these things, but was there something about it that made her feel different? Or because she actually admitted how much she was drawn to it? Katie left Tony's apartment and called Tracy from her car. Tracy wanted to hear all the details and suggested meeting at Katie's house. Now, less than an hour after she had left Tony, Katie sat across the table from her friend and tried to describe what had happened. It wasn't easy. Tracy just didn't understand what it was like to want to do these things and enjoy them. And Katie didn't know how to explain this to her. How do you tell someone why you like it if you don't know the reason? Katie absolutely loved the experience. It was part of her nature. Tracy had no such interest, and that was her nature. It's like trying to explain why you like the taste of your favorite food, especially to someone who doesn't like it. There might be some explanation, but in the context of the conversation, it didn't matter. Katie, however, found such frank conversations arousing. Even if she couldn't explain the why, she still liked to talk about it without restrictions. Are you going to see him next week? Asked Tracy. We'll see, Katie replied, trying to appear indifferent. She knew full well that she couldn't wait to see Tony again, but she didn't want to seem too eager. She wondered why this was still important to her. She had already told both Trish and Tracy how much she liked it. You'll go, Tracy laughed, looking knowing. Katie opened her mouth to protest, but Tracy cut her off. Hey, it's okay, she said with a smile. I wouldn't give up my chance either. God, how I love it when he shows strength and passion. And you came back to him twice, she added. You love him as much as I love being in his arms. Okay, Katie replied with a smile. Let's just say I'm seriously considering it. She tried to look Tracy in the eyes as she spoke, but couldn't resist and smiled, looking away. This second time with Tony was a real pleasure for her. She loved every moment. She was at the height of her emotions. It was especially touching. His reaction was so strong that she felt incredibly happy to see her efforts bring so much pleasure. Katie felt herself getting aroused again, just remembering this incredible moment. Well, are you talking about today or next week? Tracy laughed again. Okay, Katie laughed along with her friend. It was amazing, and I can't wait to do it again. Satisfied. What a mood. Now you are one of us. Tracy smiled. This phrase made Katie think. And who are we? She asked Tracy. What? You said I was one of you, Katie repeated, not quite sure where her question was leading. So who are we? Good question, Tracy admitted. I'm not sure. Me? I'm a woman who married a nice guy, but he just doesn't have enough. Well, some passion to really rock my world. I think you're in a similar situation. Your husband is good for you in every way. In many ways, but there's something you don't get from him. Tracy paused to see how Katie would react. She nodded, making it clear that she agreed. But Trish, I don't know what to call her. The main instigator, she gets a kick out of organizing it all. She likes to watch others have fun, even watch herself. I think the video is just a byproduct. She doesn't want to be involved in it. She just likes to see how others do it, and video is the most convenient way. Yes, perhaps, Katie said thoughtfully, digesting Tracy's words. But who are we in general? I don't understand. Are we some kind of organized sexual group, or just wives looking for what they're missing? Both women were silent, looking at each other. Katie was sure Tracy knew the answer. Both probably felt like they were just lustful wives, but it was clearly much more complicated than that. None of them wanted to be involved in some big adventure, but it was part of everything that happened. At the same time, both benefited from Trish's secret activities. Both understood that this was what added urgency to the whole situation. Tracy said so herself. She could find the right guy to have sex with, but it wouldn't be the same as what they were getting through Trish's system. Okay, Tracy said slowly. Let's say we're a little more organized than just cheating wives. So what? Does that make us more guilty? Or, she added before Katie could respond, it would be less wrong if we just took lovers. Katie shrugged. I'm not quite sure where this was going, she admitted. It just seems like we're participating in something. That. Katie hesitated, unable to find the right word to accurately describe her feelings. I think I know what you mean, Tracy admitted. But, she shrugged, it is what it is. And it suits me, more than just a fling. She paused, searching for words. I've never cheated on my husband before, Tracy added after a moment. And I probably wouldn't if it was just a guy hitting on me. I guess because it's all organized, without any emotional attachments, it seems more acceptable. Weird, right? Yes, Katie automatically agreed, although she didn't fully understand what Tracy meant. Trish lured me in with these tapes, Tracy continued. And once you saw it, well, once I saw Tony, it was only a matter of time. I haven't felt this way in so long that I almost forgot how amazing it is. Now Katie's eyebrows rose in surprise. After all, Tracy was a rather petite woman, several inches shorter than Katie herself. She also had a more fragile build. How could such a tiny woman need such a large man? The conversation was already quite frank, so Katie decided to ask about it directly. I don't know. I had a friend, almost 6 feet tall, who didn't like sex with big men. She said it hurt her. What about me? 6 or 7 doesn't even attract my attention. I don't know what's wrong. Maybe there is no connection between height and depth at all. Tracy looked at Katie, as if expecting that answer to be sufficient for her. Katie nodded. This was another one of those questions that were fun to discuss, but impossible to parse out or define in clear terms. She returned to her original question. So, who are we? I think we're a sexy clique, Tracy laughed. Unless, of course, you have no other option. No, Katie shook her head with a smile. Sexy Wives Syndicate. They both laughed. Yes, Tracy said, or Ost Organization of Sexy Wives. Katie laughed after thinking about it for a few moments. Speak for yourself, Tracy blurted out, laughing. I'm here for sex, not to please men. Yeah, and Trish is here to please herself, Katie replied. But all three of us satisfy him. They both laughed again. Okay, you got me, Tracy admitted. Oz sounds good, but maybe something less obvious. For example, asked Katie. They were silent for a moment until Tracy suggested a title. How about the Wives Club, she suggested. And by club, I of course mean Tony's sex. They both smiled and shook their heads. It's not very sonorous. It's kind of bland, not very exciting, Katie noted. But it fits perfectly. They laughed. Yeah, it's an acronym. But it sounds pretty accurate, don't you think? Asked Tracy. And Wives Club sounds harmless, Katie added, laughing. That's the real argument, Katie continued. I can't tell my husband that I'm going to a meeting of the Association of Cheaters' Wives, but the Wives Club that might do. They laughed loudly again. Okay, Katie said, sounding more serious than she intended. We have a name. What's next? Tracy looked at her, clearly not understanding the question. I guess we just keep doing what we're doing and leave the rest up to Trish, she replied with a shrug. Good sex once a week and a couple of new videos. I'm fine with that. Are you? Yeah, me too. It's just, Katie faltered, feeling awkward again. What if Tony let me, take over for you when it's your turn to please him? Darling, I would give in to you with pleasure, Tracy said, waving her hand. But I think he won't agree, and even if he did, Trish wouldn't allow it. Trish doesn't like it herself, so she certainly won't let me refuse. Well, I'd take her turn too, Katie said with a slight laugh. No, he likes making her do it. He likes making me do it too. He enjoys it, Tracy said, shaking her head. He knows that Trish and I would stop all this if the decision was ours, and he understands that you will return voluntarily. Understood? Katie understood everything perfectly. She thought about this herself. Basically, she was just looking for an excuse to do it more often. She realized that she was still under the influence of having done it twice that day. Perhaps when she cools down a little, her desire to see him more often will subside. Or maybe once she gets into a regular rhythm like Tracy, the feeling of not having enough will go away. After all, Katie reminded herself, it's like a buffet, take as much as you want. You don't have to serve yourself a full plate at one time. Besides, Tracy continued, Trish hates it a lot more than I do, and I'll happily keep doing it if it means she has to do it too. She grinned. What about her and her husband? Asked Katie. Oh, that's pretty funny, Tracy grinned. I'd love to see a video of this. She admitted that she does it 2 to 3 times a week, which means it's actually 4 or 5. Tracy seemed to take incredible pleasure in humiliating Trish. Obviously, a lot of bitterness has accumulated between them, despite the mutual benefit of their agreements. 4 or 5 times a week, Katie said thoughtfully. I made 3 in just over 2 weeks, and it's because I want to. Yeah, unfortunately, Tracy replied. You have a guy who likes to share it left and right, and he has plenty of opportunities. The 3 of us are already half of his week, not to mention the cashiers he sets up through Trish. Honestly, I think he's having sex with them before they even agree to be on the record. She shrugged. That doesn't mean I wouldn't go see him 2 or 3 times a week if it were possible. Yes, but, Katie countered hesitantly, he seems to prefer being satisfied by older women. Maybe, Tracy agreed, clearly doubtful. But he's like a dog marking his territory. He wants as many women as possible to try him. Yes, he might want the 3 of us full time, but he'll still get as many girls from the store as possible to do it. You can be sure of that too. And, she added with a warning movement of her finger, if he had to choose between you and another older woman who was not yet with him, you would lose. I don't know, Katie replied, feeling that there was truth in Tracy's words, but still hoping that her skill and enthusiasm made a difference. He seemed to really like the way I did it. Maybe, but he already had you. If the choice was between the 2 women he already had, then perhaps your efforts would have played a role. But this is a matter of conquest. Men cannot resist the temptation of something new and the unknown. Tracy looked straight into Katie's eyes, and she was forced to look away. She knew Tracy was right. It was a little sobering to realize that she could put so much effort into pleasing a man and still be just one of many to him. It's not like Katie wanted anything from Tony. He was just a convenient way to get what she wanted. But at the same time, she thought that her efforts were something special, something better than other women could or would want to do. However, if Tracy was right, there could be no special recognition of her skills. He would have been just as happy, if not more so, to choose someone new over her, no matter how hard she tried to please him. It frightened her a little to think that even at this early stage, she was already more dependent on him than he was on her. He could get pleasure from others, but for her, he was the only option. What if she gets used to a schedule like Tracy's and then it all ends? Katie remembered how worried she was when her college boyfriend, Tommy, went to an interview on the other side of the country. He had been gone for less than a week, but it seemed to her that a whole year had passed. And when he said that he had received an offer and was planning to move, it was a real shock. Katie then had 1 more year of school left. She didn't know if she and Tommy had a future after college. She often thought about this, but never imagined that everything would definitely continue. However, the thought of losing, more importantly, sex with him, left her feeling empty. She sensed that something similar was brewing here, albeit on a smaller scale. Her desire to please Tony was stronger than his desire or need for her. It was a dangerous position. Are you sure it's safe? Katie asked Trish. Having all this around seems pretty risky. Don't worry, Trish said, sitting at Katie's computer, more focused on the screen than on her friend's question. That's why I'm setting all this up for you. You won't be storing anything on your computer. I'm connecting you to a server where you can store it all. You can access it at any time, but there won't be anything on your computer so that my husband didn't stumble across this by accident. It's all password protected, in case you're worried about that. Trish clicked something on the screen, and Katie stood next to her, still doubtful. You know, Trish continued, not looking up from her work, you were amazing again. I watched both your videos 5 times. You really love it, don't you? Yeah, Katie replied, much more worried about what Trish was doing with the computer. My favorite part was when you thanked him at the end. It was just wonderful. Trish frowned as she typed a few characters on the keyboard and clicked something again. Then she turned to Katie. And you were sincere. It was amazing. Katie didn't even think about it. She didn't remember doing it, but if it happened, then she really felt it. It was wonderful, just like in her student years. However, there was a strange tone in Trish's voice. Katie couldn't put her finger on it, but it was something unpleasant. Was Trish making fun of her? Despised? Or did she just look down on her? Katie didn't feel like it was an open insult or mockery, but something was definitely wrong. She remembered how disagreements had flared up between Trish and Tracy several times over the past couple of weeks. Katie couldn't pinpoint what the root of the problem was, but it seemed to have something to do with their sex and videotaping scheme. There was clearly some hidden bitterness in Trish that Katie had not noticed before. In the past, Trish could be harsh in her assessments of other people, but she always did it in a joking tone. Her words might have been cruel, but they both laughed it off, treating her snideness as a kind of game. Now Katie noticed that this causticism was becoming much less playful, and the targets were not third parties, but Tracy and herself. Okay, here we go, Trish said, pointing at the computer screen. Now all the videos are uploaded to the server. In the future, I will set up a shared server for the 3 of us. But for now, you will download new recordings from the discs. I will make copies and give them to you. You upload them here and then destroy the disc. Trish showed how to do this and then asked Katie to repeat the process. Everything turned out to be quite simple, and Katie quickly figured it out. However, she still had doubts. She decided not to discuss this with Trish for now. She would probably insist on complete safety and dismiss her fears with condescension. No, Katie will wait until Trish leaves and call Tracy. After all, it was a matter worth discussing with someone who thought the same way as she did. But there was one more thing that bothered Katie, Trish's hidden bitterness. Did you really call Tony and tell him not to spend time with Tracy the way she wanted, but to make her do something else? Asked Katie. Yes, Trish replied with an amused snort. She laughed at me so much because of what I had to do for Ed. And you called Tony to get revenge? Trish sounded like she hadn't even considered that there might be anything wrong with this. I know she doesn't like it as much as I do. She could be a little more sympathetic. If she did anything else to make you angry, Katie asked, would you do it again? This question was important to Katie. She understood that the power Trish had over Tracy could also be used against her. What happens if Katie ever makes Trish angry too? Oh, I think she learned her lesson, Trish said with such confidence, as if there was no doubt about it. She clearly hadn't considered that Katie might feel vulnerable in a situation like this. What about you and Ed? Katie asked cautiously, deciding to take a risk and delve into this sensitive topic. She was very curious, but at the same time, it was a test to see how far she could go with Trish in these conversations. Trish gave her a suspicious look before answering. Katie noticed this, and it became clear to her that the topic was clearly sensitive. Not really, Trish answered dryly. He still tries to use video as leverage, but it doesn't work as effectively as before. At one point, I really thought that he would file for divorce, and with this video, he could completely push me against the wall. I would have lost a lot, that's for sure. But now, Trish shrugged, he's made it clear that he doesn't really care about me or what I do. While I do satisfy him from time to time. But I thought... Katie hesitated. Didn't Trish say she does this for him several times a week? That I had to do this to him almost every day? Trish guessed. Katie nodded. Yes, I say that to see Tracy's reaction. as long as she's smart enough not to laugh in my face anymore. But we know what will happen if she makes a mistake. Maybe she will again be forced to do something she doesn't want to do for a month. Trish smiled a bitter smile that made Katie's stomach turn. Why is this so important? Katie insisted. Well, that is, so what if she laughs? Still, we get something out of it, right? Trish turned to Katie, looking her straight in the eyes. Katie was a little surprised by the intensity of her gaze. I don't like doing this. This makes me angry. Yes, she waved her hand towards Katie's computer. I would like to look at it later. But that doesn't change the fact that I don't like it. Tracy doesn't like it either, Katie replied. But I don't think she would do anything to hurt anyone because of it. Tracy has her own problems with this, Trish said. But overall, she tolerates it well. Maybe she'd rather have sex, but that's all for her. Why is it so different for you? Now Katie was really interested. It's a matter of power, Trish said simply, as if that explanation was enough. Katie looked at her, not understanding anything. You give man power. You become his servant. I don't think there is a single man on this planet who has the right to stand over me and tell me to satisfy him. Wow, Katie said quietly. She never saw it as a negative thing to be a man's servant in this context. It wasn't that she didn't understand Trish's point of view, it was just that from her perspective, it wasn't a problem. So every time Tony makes you do it, it's like an insult or something. Insult? Trish raised an eyebrow. No. Well, maybe. It's humiliation, that's what it is. He knows how much I hate doing this. That's why he does it. Is this what turns you off the most? Asked Katie. She wasn't particularly surprised. Trish has always been a boss, a person who likes to be in control. Any attack on her authority would most likely irritate her. Submitting to what was humiliation in her head was especially hard. That's the main reason, Trish said. But everything else isn't fun either. Katie remembered the video she watched at Tracy's. Trish seemed quite willing to participate. Perhaps it was just a game, something she did for herself, so that she could review it later. Or maybe a little bit of humiliation turned her on. She would never do this on her own. She needed to be pushed, almost forced to do it. But once she did it, perhaps there was some excitement in it. And of course, if this was gambling compulsion against her, well then Trish had to support the idea that she didn't like it, at least to keep things interesting. Is this even the case with Ed? Asked Katie. Trish gave her a sharp look and then shrugged. He knows I don't do this voluntarily, she replied. Well, there were times when I did that for him sometimes, just to make him happy. But those days are long gone. Now everything is different. We both just don't care, I think. If it weren't for that video, I wouldn't have done this to him either. But does it? I don't know. Bother you as much as it did with Tony, Katie insisted. No, it's not the same. Tony does everything for the sake of humiliation. For him, this is as important as the process itself. Ed just wants to be satisfied. He has as much dirt on me as Tony does, but he doesn't use it in the same way. He knows I don't like it, and he almost apologizes for having to force me. And Tony, he gets a kick out of making me do it because he knows I hate it. Katie suggested that Trish's bitterness stemmed from her inability to experience true intimacy with a man. Trish could only derive pleasure from watching what she could not do herself. Katie felt sorry for Trish, even though she was trying to hurt her. Perhaps it was Trish's personality. To achieve true satisfaction, a woman had to lose at least a little control. Trish's controlling nature likely prevented her from letting go enough to experience this. And this bitter side of her certainly didn't improve the chances. It was sad, Katie realized. Something so important that she took for granted was inaccessible to Trish. There was no point in saying anything to Trish now. Katie would think about it, maybe even ask Tracy, although she suspected that Tracy's position was unlikely to be sympathetic. Okay, here you go, Trish announced, standing up from the computer. Try. She pointed to a chair, inviting Katie to sit at the computer. Trish showed where to press. Katie selected a video called Morin03 and clicked on it. It took a few moments, But then the usual video player appeared on the screen, and the first frame showed the back room of Trish's store. Katie pressed play and watched, almost hypnotized, what was happening on the screen. It was a strange feeling to watch someone's intimate life in which she herself took part. "So how's it going?" Tracy asked when she and Katie met. Over the past few weeks, they had been meeting together a couple of times a week to discuss everything. "Great," Katie replied without even thinking. Of course it was great. But was it really excellent? 2 weeks ago, during her second meeting with Tony, it really was great. She felt that their connection had reached a new level. Last week and yesterday, everything was just fine. In both cases, Katie achieved emotional release, and it was pleasant. But yesterday, she felt like she was missing something, as if they were missing that spark they had before. "Have you watched your videos?" Tracy asked, snapping Katie out of her thoughts. "Cool, right?" "Well," Katie replied, not quite sure what she was thinking. Yes and no. She fell silent, trying to express her mixed feelings. "Yes, that's interesting," she finally said. "But, when I see it, I want to do it again, and, well, I have a once-a-week budget, you know." Katie also still felt uncomfortable with the idea of recording. It felt incredibly self-exposing. But beyond that, she didn't like the fact that Trish and Tracy, especially Trish, could see how into it she was. This exposed a vulnerability that someone like Trish could use against her. "What about the rest of the videos?" asked Tracy. Katie shrugged. She watched a lot of them, and they were interesting too. But she did not admit that she most often watched the video with Tracy herself. Scenes where Tracy was passionate about the process were incredibly exciting for Katie. She couldn't explain why, but it was so. "Same problem," Katie said with a tired smile. "I can't watch me or anyone else do this and not want the same thing, you know?" "No, I really don't understand," Tracy laughed. "I could watch you do this all day, damn. It's so exciting. But I still wouldn't want to be in your shoes." "Well, I could watch you get carried away by the process all day and not want it." Katie laughed in turn. "So we're even." The women fell silent again. "So," Tracy suddenly perked up, "if you could get as many guys as you wanted at one time, how many would you want?" The question caught Katie off guard, and she laughed. "Don't know," she answered. "Do you think I'm such a woman of easy virtue?" "No, come on," Tracy insisted. "If you could choose, how many guys would you like? Keep it purely hypothetical," she continued when Katie didn't respond. "Imagine if we could clone Tony. How many Tonys would you like?" They both laughed at this question. "It's not about the number of guys," Katie said with feigned irritation. "I would be happy with one guy if I could do this 3 or 4 times a day." Both women laughed again. "Okay," Tracy replied. "So at least 3 Tonys, maybe 4. "No, no, just one that I could please several times a day." "Why not several at once with each?" Tracy insisted. They both continued to smile and laugh, but Katie sensed that there was some seriousness in the matter. "You think I could just line up a bunch of guys in a row and I could serve them all?" Katie asked, pretending to be shocked by such assumptions. "Wouldn't you?" asked Tracy. "No," Katie replied sharply, her smile beginning to fade. "I love it, don't get me wrong, but not like that." "Why is this so different?" For some reason, Tracy continued to insist. Katie wondered why she was pressing so hard on this topic. "It's like the difference between watching each other on video and doing it in person," Katie blurted out. "It's not something personal, and I like it to be personal." "Okay," Tracy replied, laughing. "I'll let you watch me make out with Tony if you do it with 2 guys, okay?" They both laughed, and Katie felt the tension in the conversation begin to subside. Tommy still had one friend, Katie suddenly remembered. "It's not like I did anything to him," she hastily added, "but he was a nice guy and quite nice." And Tracy encouraged her. "And a couple of times I thought I could ask Tommy. Well, you know." Katie gestured to explain her thought. "But I never made up my mind. I was just thinking about it." "Ask him? For his friend to join you?" Tracy raised her eyebrows, her eyes sparkling with amusement. So you were thinking about it after all. Oh, as if you never thought about it, Katie snapped. Well, I never thought about doing it with two guys at the same time, Tracy admitted. But I had other thoughts. Katie motioned for her to tell her more. Well, I don't really like certain affections, Tracy continued. But at the same time, the idea of being the center of attention from two sides at once. Well, Tracy paused to enhance the effect. I think I might like this. Tell me more, Katie encouraged her, curiously awaiting details. Well, Tracy continued, there's a lot of that little bad girl feel to it, Katie nodded. Is it like being called a certain word while you're doing something? It would be similar, but even more exciting, if I were with two men at the same time. It wasn't really a fantasy or some kind of scenario, Katie explained. It was more just the thought that it would be interesting to bring in another guy. I tried to explain earlier, when a guy is satisfied, it usually takes some time before he wants again. And if there was another guy. Katie smiled. I wouldn't have to wait. Understand? Yes, Tracy said. Yeah, that's why I never acted on that thought, Katie admitted. I mean, as cool as it would be to have a second guy ready and waiting well. Katie shrugged. I just couldn't imagine that someone would stand there and watch. And I'm not sure how Tommy would react to that, she added almost casually. He's a guy. Most likely, he would have been delighted at the time, and then he might have changed his mind, Tracy said with a hint of humor and contempt. Perhaps, Katie agreed. So the second guy, Tracy continued, would you like to give up the pleasure too? I don't know. Katie never thought much about it. Maybe. I kind of never gave up what brought me pleasure. Ugh, Tracy wrinkled her nose. I always choose my own way, even with my husband. Tony is the only one, and it obviously wasn't by choice. Tommy always said, Kathy recalled, that the best partner is the one who is completely absorbed in the process. They laughed again. Why is this so important for men? Tracy wondered, putting on an exaggerated expression of disgust. I don't know, Katie answered, although she had a couple of guesses. But I know they like it, and I've never done it any other way. It's easier, neater, and because they enjoy it, it's more fun. I like knowing that the guy even likes that part. Yeah, Tracy said, I don't like it while I'm doing it, but then I like thinking about it and knowing that I did it. The bad girl effect again, she added with a short laugh. So, Katie laughed, you like to be a little bad girl, huh? Well, if that's what you call it, then yes, and who doesn't? They both laughed again. When their laughter died down, they fell into a comfortable silence. Katie thought about how much she enjoyed talking to Tracy like this. It was a bit poignant and exciting to talk about such fantasies and experiences. And who knows where such conversations could lead? Perhaps after discussing these topics, action to implement them would not seem so impossible. Okay, girlfriend, Tracy said, looking at her watch. I have a date, they both laughed. I'll call you tomorrow, okay? Hi, Katie heard Trish's voice on the phone. I have news for you. Trish's call surprised Katie. She was just about to leave for her weekly meeting with Tony when the phone rang. What's happened? Katie felt slightly wary. She remembered how Trish had already interfered with Tracy's visits to Tony. Tony has a new flatmate. He moved in yesterday, Trish said. At first, Katie didn't understand why this mattered. He works nights, so Tony won't be able to be alone today. Katie suddenly realized the importance of this. Her thoughts were spinning. Couldn't Tony have asked his neighbor to leave for an hour? Could we have met somewhere else? Her own house was definitely not suitable, but maybe there was some other place. So, Trish continued in a strange tone, you can cancel today and think about how to solve this by next week. Or, Trish paused, and Katie instantly tensed. She had no idea what Trish was going to say, but her intuition immediately made her wary. Or, Katie asked carefully, or you can just go to him and try to come up with something. Try to come up with something? I don't understand, Katie answered cautiously. Talk to Tony. Trish sounded impatient. Maybe you could just go into his room and close the door. But for some reason, Katie suspected that there was something more hidden behind this. Why is Trish so evasive? Something was wrong. Either Trish was trying to disrupt her meeting with Tony in order to manipulate the situation, or... But what else? Maybe Trish was trying to arrange for Katie to cross paths with the new neighbor. Whatever Trish was up to, the safest thing to do would be to cancel the meeting. But it turned out to be not so simple. Katie had been thinking about this meeting since the morning, when everyone had gone to work. She deliberately put on a light summer dress just above her knees, because she always seemed especially pleased in such a dress. She'd already watched Tracy's video twice to build anticipation. She imagined the moment of their meeting, and it filled her with anticipation. Even though she knew it would be smart to cancel the appointment, Katie knew it would be very difficult for her to go through with it. Her mind was already trying to find excuses. "Why can't Tony ask his neighbor to leave for an hour?" asked Katie. "Maybe he can. Go and ask," Trish answered too quickly and simply. It was as if she just wanted to force Katie to go to Tony. "But then why did you call at all?" Katie would have gone anyway. Maybe it was some kind of reverse psychology game. It was a complex psychological trick, and Katie couldn't figure it out. Trish was clearly manipulating her. But the only sure way to ruin Trish's plans is not to go, to give up what she craved so much. This alone should have been enough to give her strength. After all, Trish was counting on her weakness. "Maybe I should stay home," Katie said. And even at that moment, she was thinking about a possible meeting and how much she was looking forward to it. "I'll let Tony know," Trish replied without missing a beat. "That's it? Will Katie have to wait a whole week?" "Wait," she said before Trish could hang up. What do you think I should do?" "Oh, I don't know." Trish clearly wanted something, for Katie to go or not to go. But she wasn't going to voice it. "Okay, I have to run," Trish said. Katie was left standing in the kitchen, pipe in hand, torn between what she wanted and what she had to do. She should have stayed home, but she could already imagine herself on Tony's doorstep. "I should probably go," she finally told herself. "If all else fails, I can at least figure out what to do next time." "Do you remember our conversation a couple of weeks ago?" Katie asked Tracy as they sat at Tracy's kitchen table. "Which one exactly?" Tracy clarified. "Well, about fantasies, and also about whether we need a second guy," Katie added. "Yes, I remember." "And what?" Katie carefully watched Tracy's reaction, paying more attention to facial expressions and gestures than to words. "Did you happen to tell Trish something about this?" Katie asked directly. Maybe she mentioned something." "I don't remember anything specific," Tracy replied with a slight shrug. "Why?" "Because," Katie paused dramatically, "you want to guess what happened when I came to Tony's yesterday?" Tracy looked at her with a blank expression. "You already know, don't you?" "Know what?" Tracy objected, but Katie caught something in her eyes that gave her away. "You did it again," Katie said. She wanted it to sound like an accusation, but the words came out more as a statement. They were silent for several long moments. The fact that Tracy didn't object only confirmed her suspicions. Yesterday, after a confusing call from Trish, Katie decided to go to Tony and sort things out on the spot. Tony's new neighbor, Dave, opened the door for her. He looked just like Tony himself, tall, handsome, with deliberately tousled hair, carefully styled to appear casual. He was a little younger than Tony and looked fresher. "Tony doesn't really have a new neighbor, does he?" Katie finally asked. Tracy's silence was enough. "Why? Why did you do this?" "Because you wouldn't do that for yourself," Tracy finally answered. "And you clearly wanted this." Katie wasn't about to admit that yesterday had been an incredible experience on so many levels. She again felt the bitterness of betrayal that overshadowed the euphoria of her adventure. "Maybe I wouldn't have done it. But why do you guys have to?" Katie didn't even know what word to use. "Push me." "We all kind of pushed each other," Tracy replied. "Do you think I would have been doing this with Tony if Trish hadn't pushed me? But, to be honest, I was almost starting to look forward to it." "But you set everything up against me," Katie objected. "You lied, deceived, set a trap. Call it what you want. but it wasn't like they were just encouraging me to do it. You weren't honest with me. It's true, Tracy admitted. I think we decided that the end justifies the means. Maybe we were wrong. Katie wanted to stay angry, but that wasn't how she felt. She believed that Trish and Tracy had treated her unfairly again, but somehow she didn't feel the anger that she thought she should feel. She sat in silence, allowing her body language to convey feigned hostility towards Tracy. Okay, Tracy finally said. Will you tell me about this? Katie looked up. A small smile appeared on Tracy's face. I don't want to talk about it, Katie replied, but the words didn't sound as harsh as she intended. If you want, Tracy said in a mocking tone. Katie shook her head. Maybe sometime later. Come on. I know you're dying to tell me, Tracy persisted. Katie tried to snort disdainfully, but it sounded more like resignation. She looked away. Yes, she desperately wanted to talk about it. It was truly amazing, something she never thought she could do. And if not for the hidden betrayal, Katie would now be willing to talk about it. But the bitterness was still fresh. She wasn't sure if she could enjoy the memories with this feeling. So how did it go? Tracy asked, trying to overcome Katie's reluctance with her enthusiasm. Katie nodded silently. Tony wasn't just present. He held a video camera and commented on what was happening. Katie vividly recalled the wild whirlpool of emotions that his words had evoked in her. She felt embarrassed to the point of embarrassment. At the same time, she felt incredible excitement and a slight tinge of fear. The excitement was understandable. This was Katie's first time in this situation, and she found it incredibly exciting, especially the way Tony and Dave were talking about her while it was happening. This turned her on a lot. Fear, then, was more at the level of instinct. Only later did she understand where he came from. Now that Katie has discovered how much she enjoys being the center of attention with two men at once, what's next? Will she do it again? Almost certainly, if the opportunity arises. And Trish will probably make sure she introduces herself. But how long will it be until the thrill is no longer enough for her? It seemed likely that the thrill would wear off over time, and there would be a temptation to add something new. She crossed a certain line, and there was no turning back. Now she knew that her needs could grow, and it was scary. All these thoughts literally burned her from the inside, rushing out. But Katie held them back, not wanting to reward Tracy for her part in this deception. And then an unexpected thought came into her head. Have you already done this? Katie asked Tracy, with both. No, Tracy replied, not yet. She looked away. I was hoping that by talking to you about it, I would. Well, I don't know. I'll make a decision. No, you've already made your decision, Katie objected. You just want me to tell you it's cool and fun and that you should try it. Maybe, Tracy admitted, but she shrugged. Katie was silent, waiting for her to continue. But if I don't talk to someone about it in advance, I probably won't make the decision, Tracy said honestly, looking at Katie with an open gaze. In other circumstances, Katie might have been more understanding about this. Well, ask Trish to lie to you, damn it, she replied, her words and tone conveying an anger that she still couldn't truly feel. Listen, Tracy said, I'm sorry. Yes, it was a stupid move. But, she added, holding up her hand to prevent Katie from interrupting her, admit that you wouldn't have done this yourself if we hadn't pushed you, okay? Maybe I wouldn't, Katie admitted, but that doesn't make your actions right. And you know it. Katie knew she should care that this was wrong. She should have been worried that her friends had abused her trust again, and that no matter the outcome, it was unacceptable. But the truth was that the offense seemed almost insignificant compared to what happened in the end. Katie knew that Trish and Tracy had opened the door for her and gently pushed her through it. She could stand on the other side of the door all her life and never take that step, and this step brought her as much pleasure as she could imagine. She knew she couldn't maintain the appearance of anger. At the same time, some boundaries and limiting factors must be established. If Trish and Tracy don't get punished, who knows how cocky they'll get next time. Okay, I know it was wrong, Tracy apologized again, and I'm really sorry. I just wanted you to do it. For you and for me. she added. What does this even mean? Are you sorry because you know it was wrong, but not sorry because you think it worked out? Asked Katie. Tracy's frankness that this was not just for Katie's sake irritated her. I just thought it would work out, Tracy answered uncertainly, without looking at Katie. When will it be my turn? Katie suddenly asked. When will I be able to decide how and when to push you, or Trish? Tracy looked at her for a long time. You're already pushing me somehow, you know, Tracy explained. That is, I'm thinking about doing something because of you. But before Tracy even finished her sentence, Katie was already shaking her head. Oh no, Katie objected. This is not a push. I didn't deceive you or force you to do anything against your will. No, it's just support. If you did this to me, we wouldn't be talking right now. Exactly, Tracy blurted out. Because you wouldn't have done anything anyway. So when is it my turn? Katie insisted again, ignoring Tracy's response. Tracy turned away without answering. Do you see? Katie said, taking Tracy's silence as an admission of guilt. You know you wouldn't want me to do things like that with you. There was an awkward pause in the conversation. Finally, Tracy turned and looked directly at Katie. What would you make me do? She asked. Katie was caught off guard by her question. This was not the answer she expected. Not that Katie even knew where this conversation was going. It was all more of a game that she felt she had to play to avoid becoming Trish and Tracy's toy. I don't know, Katie admitted, but that's not the main thing. The main thing is... She paused, not sure what she was trying to say. The main thing is that even if I pushed you, I wouldn't tell you about it in advance. It wasn't exactly what she meant, but it was the only thing she could express at that moment. Trish was pushing me too, you know, Tracy said after another awkward pause, and not even for what I wanted, but for what she wanted. She looked at Katie with an expressive gaze. Do you think I would have done anything if she hadn't arranged it? It's not the same, Katie objected. She didn't discuss your fantasies with you and then set things up to make something happen. True, Tracy agreed. What she did to me looks more like coercion or blackmail. And you got the best deal. Katie never felt the anger she thought she should feel. And now that she saw the difference between what Trish did to Tracy and what Tracy and Trish did to her, her desire to argue weakened even more. So why did you let her win? Asked Katie. Tracy shrugged. Don't know. But I'll tell you that this word fits perfectly. Win. I let her win. Is it so important? Katie asked doubtfully. Or was that also just an influence on her part? Well, Tracy said with a slight smile, you can't say I hate it, you know. But it wasn't like that with you. You wanted an excuse or an opportunity, and I didn't want that. And now? Asked Katie. Is Trish still pushing you? This is a sore subject, Tracy sighed with obvious irritation. She's still pushing, but it's different. She, in fact, no longer needs to do this, and the fact that she continues irritates me. But what angers me the most is when she says that I actually like it now. Like? Well, yes, in a way, Tracy admitted. And I would have said so myself if she hadn't stuck it out so much. It's like she's rubbing her nose in me, you know. Katie nodded. So you like it now? But don't you want to admit it so Trish doesn't brag? Something like that, Tracy replied. But it's not that I really like it, okay? Rather, there are certain moments that I like for various reasons, and not always right at that moment. I like the feeling of power and attention. But some aspects are not fun. But here's what's strange. Even what I didn't like eventually arouses interest. Maybe I don't like it in the process, but then, remembering it, I think about it with some fervor. You have something of an internal contradiction, said Katie. Yes, that's right, Tracy said. Maybe I don't like the process itself because of some details, but when I look at myself, I only see a hot girl who is enjoying the moment. It's exciting. I think it's funny to watch and all, Katie replied, but not in the same way as for you. For me, it just makes me want to do it again. I like the moment itself. It's interesting to watch afterwards, but nothing compares to the process itself. The women fell silent for several minutes. Katie felt a little lost. She didn't go into this conversation with a clear idea of what she wanted to say. The accusation was made. Tracy admitted her guilt. What next? So what would you make me do? Tracy asked again, snapping Katie out of her thoughts. I don't know, Katie admitted honestly. Maybe you should try your fantasy with two guys? Even as she said this, Katie felt that Tracy would hardly need a push to do it. Now that Katie has broken down that barrier for her, Tracy will probably go for it herself. The conversation paused again, and both women became lost in their own thoughts. Suddenly, Katie remembered a story. I dated this guy after Tommy, she began. His name was Jeff, and he was obsessed with married women who cheated. Tracy didn't seem surprised that Katie would suddenly jump into a seemingly unrelated story. She listened carefully. He kept asking me which of the women we saw could cheat on their husband. Sometimes he would point directly at someone and ask what I thought. Katie paused for a second, remembering. In the end, I made him tell me where he got this hobby from. It turned out that it all started when he was in college and worked as a lifeguard in the summer at a local fitness center. It was close to his home, and many of his clients were his neighbors. Katie paused briefly to organize her thoughts, and then continued. Among them, there was one woman, I think her name was Sanders or Saunders. She lived just a couple of houses away from him. Married, with school-age children. Jeff always thought they were a typical, boring family. This woman came to the fitness center 3 times a week, always at the same time. She trained a little, swam, took a shower, and went home. Every time it's the same, as scheduled. But one day Jeff noticed how another rescuer, a guy a little older than him, came out of the storeroom. A few minutes later, Mrs. Sanders came out of the women's locker room. She said hi to Jeff as usual, and he didn't notice anything unusual. But 2 days later, he saw the same rescuer coming out of the storeroom again. This time, he noticed that the guy looked a little tense and hurriedly left. After a minute or two, Mrs. Sanders reappears. Tracy leaned a little closer, listening intently. That made Jeff wonder what was going on. At first, he thought that the guy might have found some secret hole in the closet to spy on the women in the locker room. Jeff became curious and checked the pantry the next day, but found nothing. Then he decided to hide there to find out what exactly was going on. Katie smiled. The next week, he hid in the storeroom before Mrs. Sanders came to practice. And everything repeated. The rescuer came in, locked the door, and a couple of minutes later, Mrs. Sanders entered there too. Tracy listened without looking up, completely immersed in Katie's story. Jeff said it was completely surreal for him. He did not expect such behavior from his neighbor, whom he considered an exemplary wife and mother. From then on, he developed this interest in married women and could not get rid of it. So what happened then? Tracy asked, fascinated by Katie's story. Well, they just met in the storeroom a few times, and for him it became a symbol of something forbidden and at the same time attractive. He saw how far people could go to hide their desires, and it hooked him. Katie fell silent, watching Tracy's reaction, who nodded thoughtfully as if trying to understand the complexity of human emotions and actions. He decided to tell her to go back to the locker room, and she obeyed. This was the start of a 3-year relationship in which Mrs. Sanders regularly dated Jeff and other men. She never showed any signs that she knew Jeff other than as a neighbor. Jeff felt that Mrs. Sanders lived a double life at home. She was an ordinary mother and wife, but behind closed doors, she had secret desires and affairs. It made him wonder about the other women in their area. Tracy, listening to this story, tried to understand what this meant for their own relationship. Kathy explained that it was a push that caused Mrs. Sanders to take certain actions. She hinted that she sometimes needs a similar push to get things done. Tracy noted that their methods may not have been perfect, but Katie also had a desire that she may not have known about. They discussed the possibility of repeating the experience, confirming that it was part of their overall journey to self-discovery. Tracy sat nodding as Katie finished her story. So what does this mean? Tracy finally asked. For us, I mean. I still don't understand what this means for us, Tracy said. Do you think she was like you? Did you really enjoy doing this? Well, yeah, maybe, Katie said. But that's not the point. He nudged her. He told her to go back to the storeroom. This push was enough. Katie understood what she wanted to say, but didn't know how to explain it. The first time I went to Tony, that would have been all the push I needed. I think I'd rather have the push come from myself, rather than from you guys manipulating me. Your Mrs. Sanders was pushed a little more than him telling her to go back to the pantry, Tracy countered. She knew Jeff knew about her and the other guy, so she needed to do something to protect herself. And it turned out to be something she enjoyed doing, so it worked out really well. Tracy looked at Katie with a long, serious look. And you would never have gone to Tony if we hadn't done what we did. And then it's damn unlikely you'd ever get around to playing with more than one guy. But perhaps we were wrong. Katie began to protest, but Tracy continued, Okay, let's say we were wrong, at least in our methods, but admit that you want to do it again. Right now, if you can. Well, there's Amy, Tracy said. She's been cheating on her husband almost since they got back from their honeymoon. What about Margaret? Katie added. Do you think she's still seeing Tony? Perhaps, Tracy replied without much thought. But not like us, you know, on a regular basis. But I can totally imagine that she might do it if she had the chance. Heck, for that matter, I think any woman could do it if she had the chance. Of course, given our circumstances, Tracy quickly added. Our circumstances? Katie asked. Well, yes, you understand, Tracy explained. If there is something missing in their relationships with their husbands, and they would have the opportunity to make up for it, then why not? I don't think it's that simple, Katie said, shaking her head. After all, I went without something for 10 years, but until you pushed me, or rather tricked me into luring me, I never would have even thought about it. Are you sure? Tracy asked, ignoring Katie's jab. Katie nodded, but she wasn't really sure. Although, perhaps this was just a judgment in hindsight. If she hadn't been with Tony and rediscovered passion, she wouldn't have had this thirst. Tracy apparently read the uncertainty in Katie's eyes. What if, she asked, some guy himself started pursuing you? And what if he really managed to get your attention? I don't think so, Katie replied. Well, people have tried to flirt or woo me before, but it always remained just a game, and I never even thought about any man sexually. Tracy nodded in agreement. Yes, it was probably the same with me, she admitted. It wasn't until I watched Trish's tapes and they made me think about what I was missing that I even considered the possibility. Same thing for me, Katie agreed. I haven't even thought about doing this in so long that I almost forgot about it completely. So you think there aren't many people like us? Tracy asked. Are we one of the rare Mrs. Sanders? That's the question, Katie replied. That is, there will always be people like Amy in whom no one would be surprised. But what about the rest? How many of them are doing something, thinking about something, or just going with the flow, ready to find themselves in a situation similar to ours? Tracy thought for a moment before answering. Well, I'm sure there are a lot of women who don't get everything they want from their husbands. But like us, they ignore it long enough, and then they just forget. If someone reminds them, they may start to wonder what they are missing. But if they never have to face it, they'll probably be content to keep it under lock and key. So you think this happened to us? Asked Katie. Trish kind of forced us to face this. Sort of, Tracy replied. I mean, I didn't forget about it. I just wasn't going to do anything. And you? I think I just forgot, Katie said. I really haven't thought about it. I don't even know how many years, and now it's constantly on my mind. Yes, it's the same for me now, Tracy said. I didn't completely forget, but I didn't really think about it. Now, Tracy laughed. I'm literally counting the hours between appointments. I guess before, when I was with a man who constantly wanted me to do this, I didn't have to wait, so I didn't feel that way. And now I have an incredible time that makes me want even more. And then I have to wait a whole week. Talk about incredible timing, Tracy said. What about this? Are you going to tell me? Katie took a deep breath. She really wanted to tell Tracy everything. Did she do enough to get her point across? She didn't know. But I knew one thing. It was too good an experience not to talk about it eventually. And if she was going to tell Tracy anyway, wouldn't it be easier to do it right now? Even as she was about to start talking about her experience, another thought appeared in her mind. What Tracy said. It was, without a doubt, a joke. But Katie decided to bring up the topic anyway. Remember when you said if I did it with two guys, you'd let me watch Tony do it with you? Asked Katie. The suddenness of the question was instantly reflected on Tracy's face. What? Tracy asked. Did I say that? Yes. What do you say? I guess it wasn't a serious proposal, Tracy said, shifting a little in her seat. Why? Would you really want to? Katie smiled and shook her head. Tracy visibly relaxed. No, I don't think I'd want to watch you do that to him, Katie said, emphasizing the word doing. This emphasis did not escape Tracy, and her eyebrows shot up. The women looked at each other for several seconds. Katie smiled and Tracy looked away. I don't know, Tracy muttered. I mean, I guess we've already seen each other and everything, but... Tracy had the same problem as Katie. It's one thing when someone looks at you in the video after. It's completely different when they stand next to each other and look directly at the moment of action. Katie herself wasn't entirely sure if she wanted to be there and watch in person. It was difficult to imagine what would happen if their eyes met. It was a frightening, titillating thought. Could she watch Tracy do this? Just stand there and watch. Katie had no intention of insisting on this. She was more likely just playing around, trying to get Tracy back for her role in getting Katie into that situation. Or was she just enjoying Tracy's awkwardness in this conversation? Plus, it delayed the moment when Katie would start talking about her meeting with Tony and his so-called roommate. It wasn't that Katie didn't want to tell, but she still felt it necessary to make Tracy wait and maintain the appearance of resentment. You shouldn't reward Tracy so quickly after her last manipulation. Come on, Katie said with a smile. You always talk about this dirty girl factor. What could be dirtier than this? No, Tracy replied, shaking her head. It's not dirty, it's just awkward. Why? Don't know. Just like that. Would you want me to watch? Tracy asked. You forget, Katie quickly replied. I have already performed in front of an audience. Yes, but men are different, Tracy said, making a vague gesture. Would you want another woman to watch? Okay, forget it, Katie said, feigning annoyance. If you want to be a coward and go back on your words, what can I do? I can't force you to keep your promise, right? Tracy seemed truly taken aback by Katie's words and tone. Inspired, Katie decided to move on. Well, I guess since I was forced to do it with two guys, it probably doesn't count, right? I mean, said Katie, making a sweeping gesture, this is not what I agreed to. So why should you do your part? The women sat in silence for a long time. Do you really want to look at me? Tracy finally asked. Hell yes, answered Katie. She wasn't entirely sure if she really wanted to, but since Tracy was obviously uncomfortable, Katie decided to enjoy the moment. A faint smile appeared on Tracy's lips. Would you just stand there and watch? Tracy asked. Was she trying to bluff Katie? Was Katie really bluffing? Yes, Katie replied, as if she had just finally made up her mind. Yes, I think I would. The women looked into each other's eyes for a long time in tense silence. Okay, Tracy said quietly. I think that's fair. She smiled and shrugged. I should probably find out what it's like to have one more person in the room before I call Tony and his friend to give me a double attack, huh? She laughed nervously, and Katie noticed her cheeks flush slightly. Katie simply smiled back. She didn't trust her voice at that moment. Although it was a very vague agreement without specifying a time or place, Katie suddenly felt nervous. And once she raised this issue, there was no way to back down. Katie told herself it was stupid to be nervous. After what she herself had done, how could watching Tracy keep her promise cause her such anxiety? However, there was definitely some kind of trembling anticipation in her body. But to this was added some kind of nervous fear that she could not explain. She realized that she was getting ready to cross some kind of line again, and once she did, there would be no turning back. It was like having sex with a male friend. Once it happened, going back to the pre-sexual relationship was no longer possible. Will her relationship with Tracy change? She didn't know and wasn't even sure that this was the case at all. Still, it scared her. But Katie couldn't understand what was bothering her so much. "But there's one condition," Tracy said. "Let's not tell Trish about this, okay?" She looked at Katie for a long time and she nodded. Neither of them seemed to particularly trust Trish. "But Tony will tell her anyway," Katie replied. "Well, of course, but only after that," Tracy smiled. "I'm not going to tell Tony in advance. You just come with me, okay?" Katie smiled back at her. Yes, it's time for someone else to be caught off guard, although she still felt some tension about the whole thing. But excluding Trish from the situation made it easier. "Okay, now tell me everything." "Okay," Katie began. "I got there, and this so-called roommate, Dave, answered the door. And he makes it pretty clear that he knows why I'm there, you know." Katie paused and gave Tracy a disapproving look before continuing. Tracy ignored him. "So he lets me in, and I follow him upstairs, and Tony is waiting in the living room. He says hello and introduces me to Dave. And then—" Katie fell silent. There was some strange tension, wasn't there? She felt something, although she couldn't pinpoint what it was. Then she probably thought it was because Tony told Dave why she came. Who wouldn't feel awkward, standing in front of a guy who knows what you've come to do to satisfy his neighbor? And then Tracy pushed impatiently. "Well then, nothing," Katie shrugged. "We all just stood there and looked at each other for a while. At least it seemed to me that it lasted a long time." "That's it? Did you just look at each other?" Tracy was clearly stunned. "Well, yeah," Katie shrugged again. Katie took a deep breath and exhaled heavily. The electricity in the air was like nothing she had ever experienced before. Her heart was pounding, her hands were sweating, and the rush of adrenaline was almost unbearable. She didn't know what she wanted or what she was going to do, but the tension running through her body barely allowed her to stand still. She tried to convey this feeling to Tracy, but her words sounded completely insufficient. "So what happened next?" Tracy pushed. "Well, what do you think next?" Katie responded with mock sarcasm. "We had sex." Katie smiled with an obvious embarrassment, feeling her cheeks heat up with a slight blush. "Just like that, right there?" Tracy asked with a slight squeal in her voice. Katie nodded. "Yes." Katie paused, and a thought flashed through her mind. "I think that finally settles the question of whether I like it because of a man or not. Well, that is, I didn't know this guy at all, but I still wanted it, and quite strongly." She fell silent, lost in thought. In college, it was easy for her to convince herself that it was all about Tommy, that he was special to her. Her desire to please him seemed to revolve around the fact that he was the right person. But did she suspect then that it was not so much about him as about her own desire to please? That he was simply in the right place at the right time? Sure, they had a good relationship, but was that the driving force behind her pursuit? Now she knew for sure. Yes, she really had a need to please, to give pleasure to a man. But it did not come from any special affection, love, or romantic feeling. There was some part inside her, a woman of easy virtue, who fed on this feeling. "I think," Katie began slowly, still searching for her words, "I always thought I liked it because I cared about the man I was with and wanted to do it. Well, for him." "And now?" Tracy pushed. "Now," Katie shrugged. "I think I really am the woman of easy virtue that you and Trish think I am." She shrugged again. Tracy giggled. "What?" asked Katie. "Nothing," Tracy replied, still giggling. "I just can't believe you actually did this, and with someone else who was watching." Katie grinned. Katie shuddered involuntarily as the memory sent a pleasant thrill through her body. She would have thought that having an audience would make her feel awkward, but in fact it was the opposite. "Now, how about I look at you?" asked Katie. She was surprised by her own directness. There was still some excitement left at the thought of watching. Well, I don't have ladies' days until next week, and that's when I usually do it, Tracy replied. Her words sounded casual, but Katie caught a slight nervousness in her eyes. Or was it excitement? Expectation? Okay, Katie said after a short, awkward pause. I guess I don't want to spoil your fun this week. Both women laughed. This laugh seemed a little nervous to Katie. Trish was sitting at her desk in the store's office, watching one of the recent videos Tony had made for her. It was already past 5 in the evening, and there was no one around. She chose this video because the girl in it was clumsy and inexperienced. This attracted Trish. Trish noticed that the first shoots of Tony's girls were always more interesting than the later ones. All the excitement from these recordings faded away. She interfered with employees' schedules or acted harshly with them to keep the flow of new faces in check, and turnover was higher than ever. A knock on the outer office door interrupted her. She got up and went to open it. The lights were turned off, and the door was locked to give the impression that no one was there. Tony, she greeted him curtly as he walked in and closed the door behind him. Tony picked up the disc and smiled. You were absolutely right about her, he said with a laugh. She acted just like you said. Trish nodded. She reached out to take the disc from Tony, but he pulled it away at the last moment. Not so fast, he laughed, gesturing towards her office. Anger seethed inside her, but she forced herself not to react. After all, Tony was just waiting for her to start yelling at him. She kept her face impassive despite her irritation. She knew that this was the price she was paying to keep him supplying her with footage. Trish learned to maintain a stoic expression in order to deprive Tony of as much pleasure as possible. Once upon a time, there was something in this for her too. But over time, her own interest in the recordings waned, and her reasons for continuing depended solely on Tony's wishes. They went to Trish's office, and she quickly complied with his demands. She tried to maintain a bored expression, ignoring his ridicule. Once upon a time, she played for the camera, enjoying what was happening. But now her interest was directed towards finding new faces rather than repeating scenes. This made her angry, but she didn't show it. Now things have only gotten worse. Whereas before she did everything for her own pleasure, now everything depended on Tony's desires. After everything was completed, Tony unexpectedly brought his friend Dave into his office. This alarmed Trish, and she was sure that she would say no to any new request. Tony tried to persuade her to do more, but Trish firmly refused, not giving him the opportunity to manipulate her even more. Trish sat at her desk, angry and disappointed. She realized that she had lost control, and it hurt her. Her rage towards Tony was mixed with resentment at herself for allowing him to go so far. Trish knew she had to change something, find a way out of this vicious cycle of humiliation and manipulation. But something about the process seemed too tangled to simply break. She realized that her life had become like the girl in the video, naive and ready to please. It made her wonder how many people like her fall under Tony's influence and then disappear. She had no answer, only a bitter feeling that she herself continued to be part of a cycle that she both hated and perhaps could not stop. Katie sat in the living room, looking at the cup of tea she was holding in her hands. Her thoughts were interrupted by the doorbell. Trish stood on the threshold. Her expression was softer than usual, but her gaze remained tenacious. "We need to talk," Trish said, walking into the house without waiting for an invitation. Katie, surprised by her friend's sudden appearance, silently followed her into the living room. "About what?" she asked carefully. Trish sat down opposite her, crossed her arms over her chest, and looked at her intently. "About where all this leads, and about what we do." Katie noticed something new in Trish's voice, a mixture of weariness and regret that was not characteristic of her. "I can't do this anymore," Trish admitted. "All this, the video, the manipulation, Tony, it's all gone too far." Katie felt her heart clench. Trish's words sounded strangely sincere. "What's happened?" Trish looked down. "He brought Dave to me. Today, the two of them." She paused for a moment, as if trying to find words. "It wasn't about sex anymore. It was a show of power, above me." Katie was silent. She didn't know what to say. I agreed to this at the beginning, Trish continued, because I thought I had everything under control. It was my hobby, my little adventure. But now I've become just a tool for Tony. The silence in the room was heavy, like hot air before a storm. So what are you going to do? Katie finally asked. I want this to stop, Trish said, her voice shaking but sounding determined. Not only for myself, for all of us. Katie didn't know what she meant. All of us? Yes, Trish answered, looking up. You, me, Tracy, all those whom he dragged into this cycle. Katie laughed nervously. Do you think it's that simple? We chose this ourselves, Trish. We knew what we were getting into. No, they didn't know, Trish interrupted her sharply. Do you think it's normal that he treats you, me, and others this way? Do you think this will go on forever? Katie didn't answer. She didn't know how to answer. I want to get rid of him, Trish said, her voice becoming firmer. But I need your help. My help? Katie asked, her voice trembling. What do you mean? Trish took the flash drive out of her bag and placed it on the table. Here's the video. Everything I have. Everything he wrote down. Katie felt the blood drain from her face. Do you want... What? Threaten him? No, Trish said. I want to send this to his wife. These words hung in the air. Katie looked at Trish, wondering if she was joking. Are you serious? She whispered. Absolutely, Trish replied. His power rests on secrecy. If we expose him, he will lose everything. What about us? Asked Katie. What will happen to us? Nothing, Trish said confidently. He won't be able to touch us. It is his life that will be destroyed, not ours. Katie looked at the flash drive lying on the table. She understood that this was the moment of truth. Everything they did, everything they hid could be destroyed with one click. Are you sure? She asked. Trish nodded. This is the only way. Katie took the flash drive. Her hand trembled slightly. She knew that this step would change everything. Okay, she said, let's do this. A few days later, Tony called Katie. His voice was hoarse, breaking. Did you do this? He asked. Katie was silent, feeling a mixture of triumph and fear wash over her. You ruined everything, he whispered. Everything we had. No, she answered calmly. We just took back what was always ours. She hung up the phone and felt lightness filling her from the inside. For the first time in a long time, she felt free. The silence Katie felt after Tony's call was short-lived. Just a few days later, her world began to crumble. An invisible but palpable crack that had been quietly spreading in her life for years finally began to gape, threatening to swallow everything. In the morning, when she was preparing breakfast, the familiar, cozy aroma of coffee filled the kitchen, but it seemed that the air around her had become thicker, heavier. Katie put a plate of toast on the table, and at that moment there was a sharp sound. Robert lowered the cup onto the table surface with unexpected force. A dull thud echoed in her chest, causing her heart to skip a beat. We need to talk, he said. His voice was cold, like a frosty morning in which it is impossible to hide from the cold. Katie turned around, her hands still holding the butter knife, and met his gaze. She noticed an icy mixture of anger and pain in his eyes. It was not just anger, but deep resentment, the pain of a person who was wounded where he least expected. Her breath froze. She knew that Tony would not give up so easily, but she never thought that he would strike like that so quickly and mercilessly. What's happened? Her voice trembled, the words came out weaker than she intended. Robert silently pulled his phone out of his pocket and put it on the table. The screen glowed, reflecting his tense face. The video player was open on the screen, and Katie recognized the frame. It was her. With Tony, her heart seemed to fall into emptiness, hitting the bottom. Robert squinted, his gaze piercing and searching, like that of a man trying to stay on the edge of an abyss. His hands gripped the edge of the table tightly, his knuckles white with tension. It's you? He asked. The voice sounded deceptively calm, but this calm was fragile, like thin ice. Katie felt her palms become damp with sweat. Her throat tightened, and she could only exhale. Robert, The words were caught somewhere between fear and despair. She felt as if her feet were rooted to the floor, and the whole world around her began to spin. "He sent me this." Robert didn't let her finish. His voice, previously cold-blooded, now sounded harsher, rougher. Every word contained pain that he tried to hide. "Tony said you've been at it for years. This is true." His question hung in the air like a clap of thunder before a storm. Katie desperately searched for what to answer, how to explain, but her tongue seemed motionless. Her mind was racing, but nothing coherent was emerging. She knew that every moment of silence turned into an accusation. "Robert, it's not what you think." She began, but his gaze became colder. "Not what I think." His voice rose, but he quickly pulled himself together, as if he didn't want to let his emotions come out. "Then tell me what it is, Katie." He leaned back in his chair, but his posture was tense, as if he was preparing for a new wave of pain that he could not avoid. I wanted to tell you," she whispered. Her voice became almost inaudible, and she didn't know if he could hear her. Robert stood up slowly. His movements were measured, but full of dull rage. He turned away from her, as if looking at her caused him physical pain. "You know what?" "No," he said without turning around. His voice trembled, betraying emotions that he could no longer contain. "I don't want to listen to excuses." And without waiting for an answer, he stepped out the door, leaving Katie in the kitchen. The sound of his footsteps faded in the corridor, but the hum of his words still echoed in her ears. She was left alone, standing in the middle of the kitchen, like a ship running aground. Tracy's situation was no better. The day started as usual. The sound of the coffee machine, the smell of fresh bread, the light of the sun breaking through the curtains. She tried to focus on the little things so as not to think about the chaos that could fall on her life at any moment. But as it turned out, the storm had already arrived. Jack entered the kitchen, his steps sounding heavy and determined. Usually he was silent, as if he was present in the house only with his body, but today it was different. In his hands, she noticed printouts, which he threw on the table so that one of the sheets slipped and fell to the floor. "Do you understand what this means?" His voice, low and tense, was full of anger, but there was also pain in it. Tracy instinctively took a step back, her heart beating so hard that it seemed ready to jump out of her chest. She looked at the photographs that were on the table. These were stills from a video that Tony had emailed to him. In one of the pictures, she was with Tony, too close, too open. It was as if her whole world had collapsed in an instant. "Jack, listen." She began, her voice trembling, almost a whisper, but the words seemed useless, as if they could not reach him. "No, listen," he interrupted sharply, hitting the table with his palm so that the coffee cup almost fell. His face contorted with emotions that he no longer tried to contain. "You betrayed me. You destroyed everything we had. All." There was not just anger in his voice, but the rage of a man who had been deceived and deprived of support. Tracy pressed her hand to her chest, as if she wanted to stop the pain that was growing inside her. "It's not like that," she whispered, almost without realizing what she was saying. "This is not what it seems. Isn't that right?" Jack almost shouted, his eyes sparkling with rage, but there was also deep sadness in them, as if he had just lost something very important. "Then explain it to me. Explain how this is not so." She tried to say something, but the words got stuck in her throat. Her lips trembled, but her voice refused to sound. She knew there was nothing she could say that would change what he had already seen. "You always thought I didn't notice, right?" he continued, his voice becoming quieter, but even harsher. "That I'm too busy, too indifferent. Well, congratulations, Tracy. You turned out to be right. I was a blind idiot. But now everything is different." His words were like lashes, each one leaving a new scar. She felt tears welling up in her eyes, but held them back, afraid that it would make her even weaker in his eyes. "I didn't mean to." She finally exhaled, but Jack immediately interrupted her. "You didn't want to?" He laughed bitterly, but this laugh was full of pain. "You didn't want to, but you did. You've done it again and again. And now that everything has been revealed, You didn't want to. Tracy felt her legs shaking, and she had to lean on the edge of the table to keep from falling. His words sounded like a sentence. She wanted to scream, to explain, to beg for forgiveness, but her mind felt empty. You know what, Tracy? Jack turned slowly towards the door, his shoulders tense. Don't even try to justify yourself. I've heard enough. This is the end. Trish, who always seemed to be the strongest of them, suddenly felt everything crumble. Her life, which she had controlled with such confidence, was now under threat. When Ed entered the room, there was no longer any warmth in his eyes, nor the usual indifference with which he always seemed to look at her. His gaze was hard and full of contempt. "Did you think you could live like this forever?" he began, throwing a thin folder with documents on the table. "Now it will end." His voice was harsh, like glass hitting stone. Trish, usually so confident and collected, felt her back tense and her fingers tighten on the edge of the chair she was holding on to as if it were her last support. She looked at the folder, feeling her throat go dry. Her heart beat loudly in her chest, each beat echoing painfully. "Ed, you don't understand," she tried to say, but her voice trembled and the words came out weaker than she had intended. "I don't understand." Ed snorted, his laugh short and cold, like a winter wind. "Do you think I need to understand anything else after what I saw?" He pulled out a phone from his pocket, on the screen of which a frame from that same video froze. Ed held it up as if demonstrating irrefutable proof of her guilt. "It's not what you think," Trish began, but he abruptly interrupted her, not allowing her to finish. "Isn't that right?" he repeated with a bitter smile. "Then what is it, Trish? Enlighten me. Explain to me how it's not you in the video. How are these not your hands, not your voice, not your smile?" His words were like blows, each of which drove the knife deeper. Trish felt like she was starting to lose control, but she couldn't allow herself to break. She had always been the one in control, but now her world was crumbling right before her eyes. I made a mistake," she breathed, her voice filled with tension, as if every word cost her incredible effort. "But this does not mean that we need to destroy everything. Our entire life." "Our life?" Ed frowned, his face became even tougher. "You ruined it, Trish." "Not me. I'm just picking up the pieces that you left behind." He leaned forward, his gaze piercing her like a red-hot sting. "I filed for divorce," he said dryly, as if it was just another business decision. "And I will use this video as evidence. You will lose everything." His voice was cold and calculating, not a drop of emotion left in it. These words hit her the hardest. Trish felt her throat constrict and fought back the tears that welled up in her eyes. She couldn't show weakness, not in front of him. She sat up straighter in her chair, although her hands were still gripping the edge of it so tightly that her knuckles were white. "Ed, please think," she said quietly, but her voice already sounded weak. "I didn't want it to go this far." "You didn't want to." He interrupted again. "You didn't want to? Then why did you do it, Trish? Why did you continue?" He straightened up and took a step back, as if he could no longer stand close to her. "You were my wife, mine, and now you are just a mistake that I intend to correct." With these words, he took the folder, turned and headed towards the door without looking back. His footsteps echoed in the silence of the room until he disappeared through the door. Trish remained sitting on the edge of her chair, her breathing shallow and uneven. She stared into space, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Her confidence, her strength, everything was gone. At that moment she felt small and helpless, as if her whole life was on the edge of an abyss from which there seemed to be no way out. Tony, realizing that he had been exposed, decided to strike back, merciless and humiliating. His revenge was carefully planned and cold-blooded. He didn't just send the video to their husbands. That wasn't enough for his thirst for retribution. He made sure their shame became public knowledge. Fake social media accounts began posting videos accompanied by sarcastic comments and innuendos. Posts appeared in forums, anonymous chats, and even in groups where their colleagues, friends, and neighbors were members. Within days, Katie, Tracy, and Trish's lives became a nightmare. A few weeks after everything was revealed, The three women gathered at Katie's house. The small living room, which had once had a cozy atmosphere, now seemed cold and empty. The soft light of the table lamp picked out their haggard faces from the darkness. Katie, sitting on the sofa with a cup of cold tea in her hands, avoided looking at her friends. Her gaze was drawn to the crack on the porcelain cup, as if the answer to painful questions was hidden there. Tracy nervously fiddled with the sleeve of her sweater. Her usually bright eyes were dull, red from tears that seemed to never end. She was the first to break the silence, but her voice was quiet, broken. "We didn't think he'd do something like that." She took a deep breath, trying to control the trembling in her voice. "But he's always been like this. Cruel, vindictive. Why did we think we could just stop all this?" Trish, sitting opposite, shook her head grimly. Her usually collected appearance was now far from usual. She looked like a person who had lost her senses. The deep wrinkles around her mouth betrayed the fatigue that was squeezing her heart. "We thought we would ruin his life, not ours," she said, without looking at Tracy. Her fingers squeezed the teacup with force, so that the subtle sound of cracking glass could be heard. She shuddered and carefully placed it on the table. How could we be so wrong? Katie looked up at her friends. There was more anger than pain in her eyes. She clenched her hands so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "Have we not crossed the line ourselves?" she suddenly blurted out. "We wanted to free ourselves, but we did it, the way he would have done it. Dirty, we are no better than him." Her voice cracked at the last words, and she lowered her head. There was silence in the room, so dense that you could hear the branches cracking outside the window from the light wind. Tracy rose sharply from her chair and began to walk around the room. Her movements were sharp and impetuous. "Are you saying it's our fault?" She stopped and glared at Katie. "Do you really think so? That we deserve all this? Broken families, children who no longer look at us as heroines, husbands who—" She fell silent, unable to finish. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Trish, watching this scene, covered her face with her hands. "We wanted justice," she whispered, "but we took the easiest path. Isn't that right? Instead of leaving, finding the strength to explain everything, we chose revenge. And now we have nothing. No marriages, no peace, not even the feeling that we did the right thing." Trish's words made Tracy stop. She slowly sank back into the chair, as if her legs could no longer support her weight. "But he was a monster," she said, as if trying to convince not only her friends, but also herself. "Isn't that right? We wanted to be free of his control. We wanted a life without him." "Yes," Katie said, her voice quiet but firm. "But we have forgotten that freedom comes with responsibility, and that you also need to be responsible for your actions. I thought I could become strong by destroying him, but in reality, I only destroyed myself." These words hung in the air. They looked at each other, and pain was visible in their eyes, but not only from losses. Now each of them realized their role in this disaster. They couldn't blame only Tony anymore. Each of them made a choice that led them down the road of betrayal. And now, instead of being released, they found themselves in a prison that they built for themselves. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. 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 Click